coronavirus and if new restrictions are needed. Separately, the Health Service Executive has responded to concerns about shortages of face masks, gowns and other protective equipment for frontline health workers. Speaking on RT's This Week programme yesterday, the HSE Chief Executive Paul Reid said a major order had been placed in China for personal protective equipment.
This is a competitive global market and we've secured a very significant order of €220 million for the delivery of personal protective equipment throughout this crisis. But I appreciate their angst. I want to reassure them it's a very significant order of 11 million masks, 1 million face shields, 500,000 gowns. So it's a very significant order that we're bringing through and will continue on orders throughout this process.
Minister for Health, Simon Harris, you're welcome to the programme. Thank you for coming to talk to us.
Thank you for having me.
They're eye-watering figures here. 11 million masks, we heard Paul Reid say there, 1 million goggles, 500,000 gowns. It's a huge order, but what the medics want to know is when will it arrive?
So basically, as we speak, this is being packaged up in China. Very kindly, an airline has agreed to go and collect it for us. So while I can't put a specific day on it, we're hoping to begin to see the arrival of some of this towards the end of the week. But I do need to make this point. There is personal protective equipment already in Ireland, and what the HSE are trying to do this week is redistribute what we already have. So you'll remember Paul Reid talking a couple of weeks ago about 1.7 million face masks already having been ordered. So as Paul rightly says, we usually spend about 15 million on personal protective equipment. We're spending over 200 million this year. Huge efforts have been undertaken by the HSE to secure this in what is quite a difficult market. There's a worldwide shortage of this. They've done really, really well. I know it can't come quickly enough. I know our healthcare professionals are just doing a brilliant job, and we all want to and we will protect them. And they're dead right to highlight this issue, and we're going to resolve it together.
So your expectation then is that these supplies will begin to arrive before the end of this week. Is that right?
That's my expectation. And the HSE are working with us to get it here as quickly as possible. As quickly as we can get more personal protective equipment into this country, we absolutely will. But I am making the point that we do obviously have some already in the country, and what we need to make sure is that there's a fair distribution of that around the place this week.
You see, Donal O'Hanlon, who's president of the Hospital Consultants, I think he wrote to you at the end of last week, and in that letter he said that he and his colleagues were assured last Tuesday that a big shipment from China would arrive last week, I think the next day. Then on Thursday they were told it would arrive the next 2 weeks. Isn't it so important that there's clear, consistent communication here, that really anything less than that just erodes confidence, doesn't it?
It is so important, and that's why we've put such a big effort into communications in relation to this public health crisis. It's also why Dr. Tony Holohan, the Chief Medical Officer, and Dr. Colm Henry, the Chief Clinical Officer of the HSE, have set up a medical leaders forum where every single Saturday morning now they will meet with medical leaders, including Dr. O'Hanlon and others, through teleconference to respect social distancing, and that provides an opportunity for an exchange of information and for any concerns or issues to be highlighted. Because you're right, that two-way flow of information is going to be key to all of us getting through this together.
And particularly that health workers themselves are confident, that those of you who are in charge of this have their backs. It would be so damaging, wouldn't it, if you were to lose the dressing room, to use that phrase?
Oh, absolutely, and I really don't expect that to happen, because I am just overwhelmed by the sense of solidarity, by the fact that people are doing things in the health service, let's be honest, that would have taken years normally to bring about, doing it over a weekend and doing it in days. I mean, the absolute dedication of our healthcare professionals, and indeed everybody working across the public service, makes me very proud to be the health minister in this country at a difficult time. So we're all in this together. We're all working extraordinarily hard and flat out, and we will protect our healthcare professionals. It's absolutely key. We need to keep them well so that they can continue to keep us well.
Can we talk a little bit about social distancing? Although the phrase, I think, and I heard it used already this morning, perhaps more appropriately, is physical distancing.
I think that's
We're not
good.
to lose social contact,
absolutely.
but maybe maintain physical distance. Now, the prospect of further restrictions being brought forward because of what we've seen anecdotally about people gathering, a lovely weekend in many parts of the country this weekend, people getting out into the fresh air, but also in some cases being together in quite large numbers. Where are we in relation to maybe more stricter measures being brought in, perhaps within days?
So firstly, can I give people a little bit of encouragement, because people are being asked to do a huge amount, and it's very challenging and it's awkward and it can be difficult for families. You remember people who have maybe kids at home, no schools, no sports. It's people are finding this very, very challenging. The good news is the Chief Medical Officer is now telling me that when we see confirmed cases of COVID-19 now, we're now seeing those cases with fewer close contacts. In other words, people are making a real conscious effort to social distance, and that is really good. That's how we're going to beat this virus. It's how we're going to slow down the transmission. On the flip side, you're absolutely right. We did, over the course of this weekend, see scenes of large gatherings. The one in Glendalough, perhaps, might have been the one that most people were talking about. I'm very pleased that the council stepped in there and said, look, we can't properly socially distance here. We're shutting down the car park. We're shutting down the food premises. That's the sort of decisive action that needs to be taken.
But is it fair to leave that to individual authorities, like local authorities, or perhaps people who are responsible for a particular venue?
I think you make a fair point. So to be very clear to everybody in Ireland today, you need to abide by the social distancing. That means there should be 2 metres between you and other people. If you can't do that, you shouldn't be operating. Tomorrow, the National Public Health Emergency Team will meet. We've been very clear, myself and the Taoiseach, we won't be making decisions based on kind of Twitter trends or political populism. We'll follow the public health advice. Tomorrow, Tony Holohan's team will consider if there are further recommendations to be made to government. And I quite frankly expect that it's likely we're going to be receiving further recommendations from them. Every time we've received recommendations from them, we've implemented them in full, and we've also published them in full so people can see it, and tomorrow will be no different.
And the options are, what are the possibilities? What's up for consideration?
So I don't want to overly speculate, but I think what we all know is we know that the 2 metres needs to be abided by, and perhaps we know that there's some places where that hasn't been possible to happen. So perhaps greater guidance in relation to playgrounds and public spaces could be useful as well, and perhaps greater guidance and supports for businesses too. I'm conscious, indeed I was in a supermarket myself at the weekend, and some supermarkets have gone to great lengths to actually put signs on the floor showing people how to properly space out. I'm also conscious that others haven't. We need to get this right. Social distancing is not just something that's nice to do. It's actually the difference between saving lives and not. And when we look at what's happening in Italy over the weekend, a fellow member state of the European Union, seeing hundreds upon hundreds of people dying in one day, we are working so hard. We must work so hard to make sure we don't go that way. We're not going to go that way. We can't go that way.
So we could be in a position where it may be necessary. The advice to you may be that we'd have to close parks, have to close off beaches, those kind of places where people recreate at the moment.
So I make a kind of rule of not speculating, but what we'll do is Tony Holohan, the Chief Medical Officer, will analyse all of these things. He'll look at the current restrictions, how well does he think they're working, he'll give us a view on that, and he'll also look at any further measures that we should take. What we're trying to do here though is make sure we can look after the well-being of all our people, their mental health, their ability to get out and have a walk, but that's very different to people going to a crowded park together. I mean, that's just not on.
In relation to testing, which is a key weapon, we're told, I mean, the World Health Organization says test, test, test. And it's not just to let people know whether they have the infection or not. It's also to give you the tools, if you like, to contain the virus. 40,000 people now waiting for a test. It's taking several days for results to come through. Is that good enough? Is that hampering the effort to contain the spread of the virus?
So let's remember, only a few weeks ago, we were only testing people in Ireland who'd effectively been on holidays in Italy or in China. And then over the space of 24 hours, all of that changed. We brought in very significant restrictions in terms of social distancing, closing schools, etc. And we also changed the criteria for testing. That has placed massive pressure on so many dedicated people working throughout the health service, and they are working flat out. There's 3 elements to testing, and it might just be useful if I can mention these. There's the number of kits you have in your country, the actual testing kits. There's the testing centres, and there's the laboratories that turn around the results. Efforts have been underway to increase the capacity of all. So last week you saw 39,000 more testing kits arrive in Ireland, 20,000 more this week, and the HSE working to secure 100,000 every week thereafter. In relation to the testing centres, we went from a situation where the ambulance service had to call to your home to test you, to now having 35 testing centres open across the country, including the one in Croke Park and others people will have seen on their televisions. And in relation to the laboratories, we've gone from the National Virus Reference Lab in UCD doing all of the testing to having more than 10 open across the country. So everything that can be done is being done. But the Chief Medical Officer would absolutely want me to make this point. If you have the symptoms, the most important thing is not the test, it's self-isolating. We are testing. We want to find out as much as we can about this virus. We want to see as quick a turnaround time. But the most important thing you can do for you, your family and your country is if you have the symptoms, self-isolate.
And what for you would be the optimum, the ideal turnaround time, realistically? Again, not so much from the point of view of giving people the information, the individual, but for giving you and giving Tony Holohan and everybody involved in this battle the knowledge, the understanding of what's happening.
So the shorter the space of time, the better. I mean, this is not a normal time. We don't have key performance indicators. This is a time of national crisis. But the shorter the time, the better. And that's why we're doing everything we can to expand the testing centres, expand the laboratories, and also the National Public Health Emergency Team looking at things like prioritisation. We need to make sure that our healthcare professionals can obviously get tested quicker because they're coming in contact contact with vulnerable people, and we also need to be able to make sure they don't have to isolate unnecessarily. So we need to prioritise certain groups of people. Remember, if you're in other countries, they've given up on community testing. I don't want to do that. There's massive benefit in continuing to test and learn all we can about this virus.
Minister for Health Simon Harris, thank you very much indeed for talking to us this morning. The time now, Maureen Ireland, 3 minutes to 8. Let's check on the weather prospects for the day ahead. Jean Byrne is at Met Éireann. Good morning, Jean.
Good morning. Well, a dry day ahead in most places with the best of any bright spells in the east and south. It'll be cloudy though in Atlantic coastal counties, and there'll be some patchy rain, drizzle and mist along west and northwest coasts. Highest temperatures today 10 to 13 degrees. The winds mostly light to moderate southerly in direction, but they'll be fresh to strong on West Munster, Connacht and Ulster coasts. Tonight will be dry in most places again, but rain and drizzle will extend further inland across much of West Connacht and Donegal. But it'll be mainly dry elsewhere. Lowest temperatures 4 to 7 degrees in mostly moderate southerly winds. Tomorrow, Tuesday, little change. Again, a dry day in most places with some bright spells in the east and south, but there will be some patchy rain and drizzle persisting on Atlantic coasts. Highest temperatures 10 to 14 degrees.